Hey, Mercedes! Mercedes! Hey!
What?
Hey!
What do you want, Audi?
Do you make motorcycles?
What?
Do you make motorcycles?
No, we don't make motorcycles.
Hey, Mercedes! We do!
No, you don't.
Yes, we do! We just bought Ducati! Now we make motorcycles!
So what?
Now we make motorcycles, and you don't!
We make motorcycles.
Shut up, BMW!
Hello, welcome to Gareth Jones on Speed. Usually we start the programme with me saying, Gareth, he's Richard, he's Zog, but it's just me at the moment. Richard's reading the Keith Richards autobiography that someone loaned me the other day, and Zog.
Right, I've been meaning to read this.
It's a good book, apparently. I haven't even opened it just yet because I'm still recovering from the joys of reading your excellent Ford Cortina complete history.
Sorry, I was barely listening. I just started reading something. Going to put it down.
And Zog is over there talking to Violet. Zog, we have started the programme.
Oh, actually, yes. I was just explaining to Violet that I have a fascinating science fact that I want to tell her, but I will have to wait until after this show.
OK, until after the show.
Yes.
Welcome to Gareth Jones on Speed. He's Richard.
Hello.
He's Zog.
Hello.
I'm Gareth, and I would like to congratulate Nico Rosberg on his first Formula One win. And I want to share this happiness with you, Zog, because you've been a big Nico fan more than any of us.
You know, he came into the sport with great promise, and you tend to feel a bit more affection for the son of a former champion. And he was a Williams driver and was making a great contribution to Williams. Not that he did them much good. And it's fantastic to see him actually get his first race win. Let's hope there'll be more to follow. Great to see him take that victory.
So that was Nico's first win. Wasn't Mercedes' first win, though, Richard, was it?
Well, no, because they kept saying on the coverage, on the TV, it was their first win since, was it 1955?
Yeah. Which was the year they withdrew from
that
racing.
Because it's like, well, there's one thing, Mercedes as a name, but it's the Brawn team.
Yeah.
Honda, right back to Tyrrell, isn't it? So
Tyrrell,
roots there. So,
although the roots of the current team, I think you could argue, was probably more in the Honda years than any other time, but then properly fixed by Brawn in the Brawn years.
So is this Mercedes' first win by Brawn for Honda?
That's too complicated a question. I'm not sure that I understand it.
Well, this is the thing, I don't understand it. And the same situation with the team who this week we call Lotus.
Just to be clear, we're talking about the black and gold ones, right?
The black and gold team from Enstone.
With the Renault engines.
Yeah, who used to be Renault, who used to be Benetton, who used to be Tolman. Let's not forget that.
Oh,
they
yeah.
Tolman. However, the team who were Lotus last year and the year before, the Caterham this year, a couple of years ago, was counting the 500 Team Lotus starts as part of its heritage. Now, because they're not Lotus anymore, they're now Caterham, does that mean that the Enstone team, they can choose to steal those 500 race wins if they want? Can they add them together with the race wins that they've got as the Renault team, if they want?
That's a very good point. There's going to be one thread of continuity.
Yeah.
Either the thread of continuity is Lotus, or the thread of continuity is that organisation that's based at that place and has had that body of people, which is, like you say,
do you remember that
Tolman
when the VW Beetle and the Toyota Corolla were sort of level pegging as the world's best-selling car?
Right.
And they'd both done about 20 million cars. But the thing is that the Beetle had basically been the same god-awful piece of rattly nonsense ever since it had started.
You really hate the Beatles, don't you? You really
and the Corolla had
so
been like sort of 7 generations of cars, and the current iteration had almost nothing. Well, actually, nothing.
Many generations of spectacular, successful mediocrity.
Yes, reliable. Just nodded off. Yes, and they so that was always assumed a bit of a cheat on Toyota's part. It wasn't fair that they were claiming massive sales because all they had in common was the badge. I mean, there was a continuity there that one replaced the other, replaced the other, replaced the other over sort of 7 or 8 generations, but that's not the point. It started rear-wheel drive, it had become front-wheel drive. It was just
whereas the Beetle was
always been
pretty much the same. I mean, yeah, well, it changed. Well, actually, it changed a lot over the years, but not in those kind of fundamentals.
Let's not get into this.
No, you're right.
So if we apply this rule to what is currently the Mercedes team...
Yes, they are the Toyota Corolla of... Well,
because
yes
don't
and
we
no.
include the one win Honda got under...
with Phil Hill?
No, I'm talking... you include those, do we? Oh, really?
Well-
And Richie Ginther. I was thinking about Honda when Dave Richards was running Honda. Jensen got a win in Hungary. Was that the only Honda win? I think it probably was.
Was that in the Earth Dreams era?
Just before that.
Wait, it was the BAR sort of...
No, they were actually Honda at that point. Dave Richards was
They
running
were
for
running in
Honda.
those sort of BAR-ish colours.
Yeah, the
before
Lucky
they went
Strike-ish
Earth Dreams.
colours, red,
Yeah.
white and black. Do we,
Anyway,
so-
no, we don't. Look,
We don't
everyone's
count
got to
that?
stop being so
No, you
silly
can't.
and
It
just
is
say,
out of control.
If you're Williams and you have a continuity of being a team, or McLaren, and you've been a team and a consistent team with the same factory, or at least in the same area with the same people, and there's been a consistent team leadership over the years, then yes, you can claim many, many things about how many starts you've had, how many wins you've had, and stuff like that. If you're just using a name and plucking things from the ether, then I'm afraid, no, you can't claim that. That's just not fair.
If they were having a meal in a restaurant that had lasted for 50 years, would you be taking the bill to the same table, the same group of people, or would that table at some point have broken up and gone away? Do you know what I mean? I think
You're
that's-
applying bistro-mathics here, right?
I am, yeah. No,
Yeah.
yes, you're right. That's a very perceptive. I mean, I'm not saying that this is, from a legal point of view, the most secure, most effective way of resolving any disputes about, who'd won 20 races, how many race wins you'd had over the years. But I'm just saying that it just seems like morally, intuitively,
It's disingenuous,
It's the
isn't it?
bill test.
So
the restaurant table.
are Red Bull the most successful Stewart Jaguar team there's ever been in Formula One? Can we say that Jaguar have won more races than anyone else last season? Can we say that Minardi...
Only if Jaguar came back in and started sponsoring the
Yeah,
team again.
yeah, yeah.
At that point, they could then start claiming that.
Okay, if we were going to apply a rule to give clarity on this, because it's just nonsense.
Because
at
we
the
need
moment.
more complicated, hard-to-interpret rules in F1.
Yeah,
Let's come up with another.
What would that rule be? How would you define it? Would you say you need a reference plane where you can change the name of the team, but you have to decide at the point at which you change the name whose heritage you're going to choose? The new one, for instance, Lotus in the case of Renault, or Renault, and when Renault became Renault from Benetton, do they have to discard the Benetton? We
What are
need
you
clarity
calling
on
this?
this.
This is the Triggers Broom ruling or something like that.
Triggers Broom.
Triggers Broom. You know Triggers Broom?
No, what?
I might be wrong here. I think
It sounds like a sort of a 1930s
No, I think it's from-
act being passed by the US Congress, the Triggers Broom
I
Trade
think
Act.
it's from Only Fools and Horses, but there may be other expressions for it. Basically, a man who owns a broom. How long have you had that broom, Trigger? Oh, I've had this for 20 years. I've replaced the handle 7 times and the head 6 times.
Oh, that's not
well, yeah, but, this is...
That's George Washington's axe.
Oh, is it the same thing?
Yeah. Yeah,
Okay.
the axe that George
Well, Trigger
Washington
used to sweep
supposedly
up when
used
Washington
to...
had finished cutting things, so that's...
Oh, well, that's going to be, yeah. but the axe that Washington used to cut down the tree, supposedly, it's still there, but it's had the head replaced 17 times and the handle replaced 15 times.
Well, there we go.
So
then.
that's the
Washington's
comedy
axe.
of it.
Lotus, the Washington's axe of Formula One teams.
Congratulations, Mr. Washington. The Constitution of the United States of America is complete. Do you have anything else you want to add?
Yes. Add lightness.
What?
I don't know, sorry. I went a little weird there. Anyway, I'm off to chop down a tree.
That's a mighty fine axe you've got there, Mr. Washington, sir.
Why, yes it is. I've used it to chop down over 500 trees.
Really?
Oh, yes. Obviously, many of the early trees were chopped down by a totally different axe. It was the same color, and in recent years I've used this axe, but it had a different handle and head, and I didn't call it my axe. But it's true to say that my axe has chopped down 500 trees. What are you doing?
Adding the First Amendment to our new Constitution, sir. No more bull about axes.
Or Formula One team.
What?
I don't know.
Sniff Petrol! Petrol with Gareth Jones on speed!
There is no doubt that we live in crazy times where you've got a Lotus Formula One team who aren't even supported by Lotus in any way as far as we can tell at the moment, because the sort of licensing deal that was granted to allow Lopez to run the Renault team as Lotus, stay with this, has run out because Lotus Cars, who used to be owned by Proton and are now owned by
Well, it's still owned by Proton.
but Proton is owned...
themselves are now owned by...
DB Hercom or something?
Yes, yeah.
Is that what they're called?
DB Hercom, I can't remember now. God, I should look this up. But anyway,
Yeah.
Lotus renegotiated their contract. They were paying some money, I don't know how much. There was an odd deal whereby the collateral for this was essentially the whole of the F1 team in some way or other.
But Lotus, the car company, was
bloody
paying money to the F1 team.
Yeah, they've renegotiated it.
Yeah.
Essentially, Lotus, the car company, Group Lotus, have had to tighten their belts because of this change in ownership at their parent company, which, amongst other things, under Malaysian law, when a company changes hands, there has to be a period of what we would call, I suppose, due diligence, where the books are inspected, and there has to be a complete freeze on spending above and beyond the day-to-day running of the company.
So this is why Lotus had to stop development of the cars, because they couldn't do a cash flow thing.
R&D money gets frozen, because that is not just keeping the lights on, keeping the product churning out of the factories, which doesn't seem to be happening an awful lot at Lotus at the moment, I think, anyway. So I presume, as part of this, in a review of sort of essential and non-essential spending, they've renegotiated with Genie, who are the major sponsor and money people in that team, to stop giving the money. But the name will carry on. They are allowed to use the name. They've just renegotiated in some way. It's all very confusing.
It's free advertising. That's what's happening. Lotus Cars are getting free advertising in Formula One. They don't own the team, they don't have to pay for the team, but the team are able to use the name because it benefits both parties.
Yes.
It's what they call freakonomics, isn't it? Have you read the book Freakonomics?
Yes, but this is a funny thing, because in a way you could argue that it's working out quite well for Lotus, the car company, because they're getting their free advertising.
But the F1 team is getting the sort of kudos of being Lotus.
Lotus name is of considerable value to them. If somebody else came along with enough money to bump the name out of the picture, then I'm sure they'd be happy with that. But the name means a lot to the team.
Doesn't it? It does work when you.
It does work when you've got when a Williams fighting a Lotus, fighting a Ferrari,
yeah, exactly. It all makes you feel warm and fuzzy about proper F1. Yes.
Do you know what it is?
I shouldn't have said Red Bull, because actually they're young pretenders compared to Williams and Ferrari and Lotus.
Yeah. It's like Status Quo granting a licence for McFly to release records as Status Quo, because Status Quo can't get arrested.
I'm not. Excellent analogy this evening. After Zog's restaurant bill.
I was just thinking that McFly's cover of Teenage Kicks was actually quite good, but I can't
fantastic.
actually.
I
quite like
it's
McFly.
actually quite good. But I don't think I've ever heard them doing a Status
I met
Quo
McFly once.
All of them?
Very polite young men.
Well,
yes.
Yeah. They're team bands, they're like that, aren't they? They're corporate little fellas, aren't they?
Well, I don't know if they are, because then, they are a proper band, and they lost their deal, didn't they? They're releasing things themselves now, I think.
And they've got over 300 Formula One starts as McFly.
Yeah, well, in fairness, you can trace them back to the Bay City Rollers too,
Yeah, you
and
can.
then all the way through, and you remember Aha F1, and then, no, I'm confusing this all.
No, you can actually trace the Bay City Rollers back to the Beach Boys, ultimately.
Yeah, although I'm just thinking, how much of a fan of Aha F1 would Richard Porter be?
Oh, oh my lord. Do you know, irritatingly, a mate of mine who is from London but lives in Oslo now, he's acting like a sort of Norwegian cultural attaché from his base in Oslo,
In a not
and
quite
sent me
nice
an email and
magazine.
went, you should be aware of this, Morton Harkett is touring the UK and he's playing London on this date, and I can't go for two reasons. First of all, I'm actually doing something else, and secondly, I would be caught in a sort of dilemma about, do I really want to go? Because all I want him to do is some
the old Aha
hits.
songs,
And he might be going, one of those awful things when you go to a gig and they go,
And he's doing jazz or something.
here's my new direction. And just do Take On Me.
Yeah, that's all we want to hear, just that one song.
Analogue, maybe.
You can thank me for Aha, by the way.
Stay on these roads.
Oh, I'll stay on these roads. Sorry, what?
You can thank me for Aha, by the way.
Really?
I know this isn't
Well,
about cars
I
at
thank
all.
you heartily.
Oh, thank you, yes.
Why?
One of the lesser achievements of my entire career was being the first man to play Take On Me when I was gas top and a VJ on Music Box in 1985.
When you say first man to play, I hate to be pedantic. No, actually, I don't hate it. I love to be pedantic. But first man in the entire universe, or first MTV play?
The first television play of that video.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
I spotted it. You know, we used to get like a big stack of 30 videos in. I have to decide, oh, hang on, look at this. This is great. The girls are going to love him. Look at all these graphics.
Have you seen that?
Music Box, the channel I work for, made a heart happen.
Have you seen someone's re-recorded that song and then put it over the video, but where the lyrics of the song are just describing what's happening
literal
in the video?
videos,
It's brilliant,
yeah.
including the brilliant refrain about a pipe wrench fight. Pipe wrench. Copyright. Yes,
So
I remember
we-
going through a car wash once in a Ford S-Max with you, and as we waited for the car to get washed, you were telling me about interviewing Aha once. And I always remember it distinctly because I was thinking, what an odd thing this is. It's a Saturday morning, and I'm in a Ford S-Max with gas top, and he's telling me about interviewing Aha, and it was nice day. Sunny,
pleasant morning.
I think.
Good way to spend the morning.
Where were we in terms of cars? There, I'm sorry.
We were talking about
McFly as
stuff,
status
yes.
quo,
which
being
kind
the
of a Lotus
analogy
discussion.
for Lotus.
As people who are sort of the name being licensed rather than being legit.
Who's going to buy Lotus ultimately? Could this be the end of Lotus, or is there value in the brand that it's going to be saved by someone like the Chinese, like the Koreans, who will scoop it up for a pittance?
Can't see them just disappearing. It's way too valuable a company in terms of both the name, their current product, but also their knowledge.
The knowledge and the engineering side,
Yeah.
the contract engineering side is the real
Exactly.
jewel in the crown.
That-
And I don't know what the numbers are, what percentage of the company's income is from that. It's hard to know, and it's also, they don't
It sort of
disclose
varies
who they
over the
work
year,
for,
depending.
but
yeah.
you could say with
But
some
they're always
certainty
doing
they-
suspension for somebody, or
and it's weird stuff. I mean, it's like
Jaguar.
sort of talked about. Yeah, the XFR.
Yeah.
It's never talked
Lotus.
about, but let's talk about it now. The XFR was done by Lotus,
Yeah.
which is why it rides properly.
Yeah.
The XKR, the latest one, wasn't, which is why the ride is a little stiff. And a lot of current Vauxhalls, Opals, Lotus involvement, and certainly engines. They do a lot of engine development stuff, which you'd never know about. They were claiming at one point it was like 1 in 10, was it more than that, of cars on sale in Europe had Lotus.
I remember they were doing
technology.
Toyota stuff.
That's a very interesting stat, because I don't know quite how much Lotus would get if you were to average it out over per model, per car on the road, how much they're going to get as a percentage of the sale price.
I don't know whether it's just a contract job. They get paid their lump sum and then I'm not sure.
No, the point is that if they've contributed to that many vehicles, that's a lot of quite valuable work that they're doing for the rest of the auto industry.
You could see a situation where the Lotus brand has been... I hate to say this because it hurts to say this, it has been devalued by the nonsense that's gone on with the Formula One teams. I think it's done real damage. And I think it could go even further if, and I'm not suggesting that it is going to happen, but should HB Durcon, DH Vercon, whatever they're called, decide to break up Lotus, to save it, and this is what companies do when there's a crisis, you sell off the good bits, as BMW kept Mini and sold off the Rover stuff and the MG stuff, you can have it for free. Cosworth, do you remember? Cosworth was split up. Cosworth Racing stayed in the hands of... Well, ultimately, Kevin Kalkoven, whatever his name was, and Cosworth Engineering, like the road division, was it Audi who took on board that? So we could see a situation where what was Lotus Engineering is bought by a firm, but Lotus Cars is sold off for nonsense to someone else,
Well, it's one of those things as well where I think the engineering side would be of great value to a number of people, but it's okay for, during the time that GM owned Lotus, the engineering side was still doing work for other companies, and there's a sort of gentleman's agreement that they would not share other people's secrets. I think if it was sold to a Chinese company, Western car makers are so paranoid about having their stuff ripped off by Chinese car makers, whether that would scare off some of their clients. I'm sure they would trust Lotus Engineering still in Hethel to be professional about it, and they have a base in the US as well where they do a lot of stuff for GM over there. But there would be that lingering feeling of, well,
of intellectual
what
copyright.
if,
They might be
what if
skittish about
they're now
getting
going
too
to
involved
be,
with the company.
It's just an idea, but I just think, it was something that would potentially ring alarm bells. And, for the same reason that GM are blocking these Chinese companies from buying Saab, because they don't want Chinese companies to have access to the technology that Saab is using from GM.
Well, and this is how
That's
protective about
interesting
it. They're
thought.
protecting a chassis that was designed in 1993. What do they call it? The Epsilon chassis?
Well, no, there's Epsilon 2, which is much more
Epsilon
modern,
2.
which
Oh,
Saab
okay.
did a lot of the work on themselves and was underneath the new 95, underneath the insignia, going underneath a load of cars.
So what we're saying here is there may be value in Lotus engineering, but it won't be as protected as Lotus cars. So obviously we can't buy Lotus engineering, but do you reckon we could buy Lotus cars?
I have £10 in my wallet as we speak. And I missed out on NG Rover all those years ago, so
you really want to get in
I'm
there
not going to
and
get beat this
get
time.
Lotus.
Good morning. I'd like to buy Lotus cars, please.
I'm afraid Lotus cars isn't really for sale, sir.
I've got £10.
I'm sorry, I can't help you. We're not really in a position to sell.
I see. Right, what else could I get for my £10 then?
Well, I could do you this Lotus Evora.
No, I'll leave it, thanks.
Gareth Jones on speed.
We're recording this show before the Bahraini Grand Prix. Is that how you should say it? The Bahraini, if it pertains to Bahrain, is it the Bahraini Grand Prix? Bahrain Grand Prix.
Well, it's called the Bahrain Grand Prix,
Yeah.
but I think you're right that Bahraini is the correct adjective for things that are of Bahrain generally.
So we say the British Grand Prix, we don't say the Britain Grand Prix, do we?
But in that
that's true.
case, it's called the British
But-
Grand Prix, and British is the adjective that you apply to things that are of Britain.
Anyway, we're
yeah,
recording
moving
this
on.
before the race that happens
In
Bahrain. And the chances are that you're listening to it at least on the day that qualifying is happening, or perhaps the day that the race is happening, or the day after. And who knows if there are going to be events at the circuit, around the circuit, which suggest that perhaps Formula One shouldn't have gone there in the current climate. This is all a bit serious, but it is a serious situation, isn't it? We don't normally talk politics on this programme, so we're actually interested in cars and motor racing and stuff like that. But we can't ignore politics when it's been talked of in the context of Formula One. In a sentence, Richard, should we be going, I say we because I'm an F1 fan, should we be in Bahrain racing at the moment?
No, I think what F1 has done, and there's a brilliant blog by Maurice Hamilton online at the moment about this, what F1 has done is just tied itself in a knot. There's this argument that sport and politics shouldn't mix. The truth is they're inexorably entwined in so many ways, and Formula One made themselves political in this situation by saying they weren't going to Bahrain last year and that they wouldn't go back until stability had been achieved in the country. Now they are going there, so by implication they believe stability has been achieved, but they're basing this, amongst other things, on a sit rep by somebody sponsored by the Bahraini Tourism Board. So they've just made themselves look a bit stupid and a bit greedy. And
Greedy's the problem, I think,
and then made it worse.
Stupid
by,
isn't good either, but, you know.
yeah, I think they could have just ducked this whole issue by just not going back.
Yeah.
But Formula One and the Bahraini royal family, I mean, Jackie Stewart, you see him propping up on the news going, oh, everything's all right out there. And it's like, well, you would say that because you're best mates with the bloody Crown Prince of Bahrain, you disingenuous, microscopic.
Yeah, well, and you know, but, I mean, you know,
He is.
It seems a shame
for
for
he goes
it's-
shooting and falconing with that lot, and then goes, "Oh no, that's all fine. They're great people." It's like, if you admitted why you're saying that, does he? The Bahraini royal family own 40% of McLaren as well, so you know there's a history of having the Grand Prix there, which is fine. But you know there is a great deal of turmoil there. It wouldn't be so bad if Formula One hadn't made that statement. We will not go back until stability is achieved.
Well, actually, I think it's quite true that F1 kind of explicitly acknowledged the problem last year when it said we're not going to go back until things are stable, yada, yada, yada. I think that whether they'd said that or not at the time, that would have made very little difference to, if you like, the rights and wrongs of whether they should be going now and to the nature of the relationship between the politics and the sport. Because a sporting event that is generated by a local culture, by people that actually want to put an event on and go to see it themselves and so on, maybe an event like that can be a little bit more removed from politics, even then probably not very much. I think large gatherings of people generally, if there's any kind of, you know, public unrest, they tend to be focuses for political action and for demonstrations of all kinds. Even if those kind of local events might be, you could somehow say, well, this is sport, not politics. If you're a very high-profile sporting event parachuted into a country that's paying quite a lot of money for the privilege in order to raise its international profile is a pretty political thing. You can't say that it's not a political thing. I don't claim to be an expert on everything that is going on in Bahrain, but I do think it's very questionable whether they should be going or not.
Luckily I am an expert in everything that's
Excellent.
going on in Bahrain. And my view on this is that, and I'm not defending Formula One, and I'm not defending Bernie Ecclestone, I don't think they should be there. And I don't think they should be there, not for the reasons that Formula One itself might not go there. Formula One's frightened of going there because they're frightened of being hurt. That's the overriding thing. Oh, it might be a bit dangerous for us to go there.
And that's certainly the reason that is most often given. However, maybe I'm being a bit naive and optimistic in saying this. I kind of hope that actually a lot of the teams and a lot of the people involved are concerned about a lot more than that. They are rightly concerned about a lot more than that. It just so happens that the issue of safety for team personnel is the only kind of legal leg they have to stand on in saying maybe we shouldn't be going to this race, because they've signed a contract that says they will attend these FIA-sanctioned events. There's an FIA-sanctioned F1 race in Bahrain. Unless it's called off by the organisers, they are legally contracted to go.
Yeah.
So the issue of safety for team personnel is the only kind of leg they have to stand on. I mean, incidentally, I know that one person at least has been not fired, but has left Williams, I believe. Somebody involved in catering for Williams. But because they refused to go to Bahrain, they had their contract terminated.
Is that the case, or was it just that they hired on a race-by-race basis anyway, as I suppose some of the peripheral...
As I understand it, the team acknowledged that this person refused to go to Bahrain on personal moral grounds. The team couldn't accommodate that because they have a contract to go to Bahrain.
And of course, I understand that Ferrari have asked Felipe Massa not to go to Bahrain for his own safety. No, really, Felipe, you don't have to come. But it's fine, I'm not worried. No, you don't have to come. No, but it's fine. You don't have to come. Take the hint.
Formula One hasn't ever said it's anything other than a world championship. It's never said that it's a free world championship. We will only race in countries where there is liberty and individualism and all those sorts of things. So, like I said, I'm not defending Formula One, but if that is their raison d'etre, if you like, then they are allowed to go to Bahrain, and like we joked about in the last programme, China, which is not that much better. It's a tricky place, but I've done it. I went to China with a TV company and made programmes about motor racing. Does that make me a bad person? Is Formula One bad for going to Bahrain? I don't think it is, but it needs to have a bit more of a political conscience for the reasons that you say, because it's become this enormous, powerful entity. It has a responsibility.
It has a responsibility, and it looks bad, and it is bad, I think, to go to somewhere like Bahrain that has the level and the nature of public discontent with its ruling regime, albeit they are, by comparison with some governments in the area, relatively liberal and kind of going in the right direction, but it's a more liberal country than Saudi Arabia. But I think it is wrong to go there when there's that level of unrest and discontent, and I think that is different to China, because I think that China is a country that, yes, certainly in many ways it's repressive and unpleasant, but it's also quite clear, on a modernising, liberalising path, albeit it's happening quite slowly. And it just feels like with China, the process of getting a Grand Prix and then putting a race, it's somehow more of the process of China becoming a slightly more welcoming and international, outward-looking society, rather than being such a repressive place. And the resistance have a very tough time in China, but there aren't many people killing themselves on hunger strike at the moment, and there aren't many people getting shot in demonstrations at the moment in China. It's a different situation. I don't think there's anything wrong with going to China, and I think there is something wrong with going to Bahrain.
At the risk of sounding like Jeremy Paxman there, so how many, you say not many people are on hunger strike and killing themselves in protest. So how many is acceptable? 3, 4, 200?
That's kind of too complicated a moral question for us to address on a motoring show.
You've been listening to Gareth Jones on politics, way out of our depth.
Just time to look at the papers. The Times lead with... Oh, no, we're not doing that.
No.
Okay.
That is Newsnight. He was Doug.
Goodbye.
He was Richard.
Goodbye.
And I'm apolitical. Well, I was until I thought about Formula 1. We'll be watching the race, won't we? Of course
Yes.
we will. Yeah.
No, I'll be facing the other way.
But listening.
I'll have it on, but I won't watch it.
See ya.
To send us an email, see pictures, get song lyrics, join our Facebook fan site or follow us on Twitter, go to garethjones.tv.
So what's this amazing science fact, Doug?
Okay. It is that most of the mass in your body and in all of the matter around us comes not from the constituent particles, not from the electrons and the quarks that then make up protons and neutrons, which is what you would probably think and what I thought. Most of the mass comes from the strong nuclear force that is binding together the quarks in the protons and neutrons.
So it's like Heinz Big Soup, where most of the mass is made up of water, not the big lumps of potato.
I guess that's sort of one way of looking at it, yeah. Mass energy equivalence. There is so much energy going on with the strong nuclear force binding these quarks together that is where most of the mass in the protons and neutrons is coming from, not the little quarks that are, strictly speaking, the more fundamental particles making up the protons and neutrons. I was amazed when I found that. I couldn't believe that nobody had told me that before.
I love that, Gareth. You haven't learnt yet that you must never tell Zog an analogy.
Really?
Because you got this scientist's approach, which is you hear an analogy, so it's like the potato
Basically,
soup.
I have to point out what's wrong with the analogy.
Yeah.
I know.
I can't stop myself analogizing. So what you're saying is that most of the mass of Lotus comes from McFly.
It depends how you define Lotus, but yes.
Gareth Jones on Speed is made in London by Whiz Bang.
Gareth Jones on Speed!